Good day. This presentation is a progress update from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries on-call fishing gear scoping project. I'm Noah Oppenheim, principal of Homaris Strategies LLC, contracted with the Division of Marine Fisheries to undertake this research. I'd like to acknowledge the support provided for this project by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation in coordination with NOAA, acknowledging the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries project team members and staff who collaborated on this effort, and finally the interview participants who donated their valuable time and energy to this work. The Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries on-call fishing gear scoping project was initiated in December of this year. The project's overall goal is to identify the challenges and opportunities associated with the use of on-call fishing gear in New England fixed gear fisheries. The project is comprised of 3 phases, the first being scoping, the second synthesis, and the third report development. We anticipate that the final deliverable of these 3 phases of the project, a white paper report, will be available in Q1 of 2022. At the outset of the first phase of the project team identified 4 focal areas used to structure the project. These include utility, technology, legal and regulatory issues, and socioeconomics. We conducted a literature review and performed scoping conversations with experts in the field. We developed an interview guide using a semi-structured format. Semi-structured interviews are qualitative methods of inquiry that merge a predetermined set of open questions contained in an interview guide with the opportunity for the interviewer to introduce additional lines of questioning. Beginning in the late winter of this year, we conducted 60 interviews with stakeholders and experts in the field. We had a very high response rate, approximately 60%. These 60 interviews included 5 with conservation organization staff, 1 with a law enforcement professional, 20 with fixed gear fisheries stakeholders, 5 of whom have themselves tested on-call gear, 7 with mobile gear fisheries stakeholders, 2 with fixed and mobile gear fisheries stakeholders, multiple permit holders, 6 with scientists or economists, 5 with gear technologists and engineers, and 14 fishery management professionals. These 60 interviews contacted approximately 65 individuals and resulted in the development of approximately 130 hours of interview, which have all been transcribed. We also conducted 7 follow-up interviews and have undertaken 3 field trips, 1 to the dock, 1 testing on-call fishing gear, and 1 operating 15 trap trawls, moving through 600 traps per day. Here I'll present a general summary of the early insights from the interviews conducted during the first phase of this project. The fishing industry participants we interviewed expressed a range of sentiments to on-call fishing gear overall. These sentiments range from optimism to skepticism, deep apprehension to an expressed refusal to use the gear. Mobile gear fishermen generally believe that the use of on-call gear could significantly impact their operations. The fishery management professionals we contacted expressed a range of responses to the use of the gear. Those whose work has focused on on-call gear were generally optimistic, while those whose work has not focused on on-call gear generally expressed a lack of awareness or understanding of the use or management implications of the gear. Focusing on utility, fixed gear stakeholders expressed that their operations relied on volume fishing and the ability to efficiently move through gear in order to maintain viable profit margins. The majority of fixed gear fishermen we contacted do not believe that the operations could tolerate a marginal decline in efficiency of the use of time or space. Fixed gear fishermen we interviewed indicated that on-call fishing gear must be designed with the goal of being as time efficient as traditional gear. Some gear manufacturers anticipate that the use of their on-call gear systems could be more efficient than traditional gear. The sentiment also applied to the use of deck space for on-call fishing gear systems. Safe operation of on-call gear was highlighted as a priority among fixed gear and mobile gear fishermen. For fixed gear operators, uncertainty about the ability to quickly retrieve gear during deployment if an operator or crew member became entangled was a major concern. For mobile gear fishermen, the danger associated with removing fixed gear from mobile gear under tension was highlighted as a major concern, particularly if these incidents were more frequent in the future. Conflict between and within sectors was the most concerning issue to a majority of the fishermen we interviewed and is likely to be discussed extensively in our white paper. Inshore fishermen we interviewed reported that they often place gear within 2 to 5 meters of their own or another fisherman's gear. They are able to do this by reading the position of the buoys and lines at the surface, as well as their knowledge of how their colleagues set their own gear, which is highly sophisticated. Conflict between the sectors was highlighted as a primary challenge. The majority of fixed gear fishermen we interviewed reported that they were frequently or sometimes experiencing gear loss due to interactions with mobile gear as baseline. Many of these individuals believed that mobile gear fishermen would be unlikely to avoid deployed on-call fishing gear either by accident or on purpose. The majority of mobile gear fishermen we interviewed reported that they actively seek to avoid fixed gear, but that lost or unmarked gear is nonetheless frequently or sometimes towed up. Several of these individuals believe that fixed gear stakeholders may place gear in a manner that prevents them from accessing fishing grounds. Focusing on technology, fixed gear stakeholders reported that they frequently experience the movement of gear during storm events, particularly periods of high current and tide, or interactions with mobile gear, or the resetting of their gear by law enforcement or other fishermen who may have crossed them and towed them up. Fishermen who regularly experience the movement of their gear concluded that gear marking approaches that relay exact or updated location of gear with a high degree of accuracy would be favorable. Fishermen who fish trawls generally express that they would prefer the opportunity to haul on-call fishing systems from either end of their trawls, depending on wind and current directions. This may impact system design and cost considerations. Fixed gear fishermen express the desire to be able to call gear to the surface while in transit rather than to wait while they are on station to do so. Some reported that they regularly fish in areas of high current, which would influence the amount of time recalled on-call gear could remain at the surface before it might be pulled underwater in some circumstances. This is a design constraint. Most fishing industry participants, regardless of sector, were not aware of how manufacturers have developed gear marking systems and display that gear to reveal or obscure certain information. Interviews provided a great deal of insight into the types of information fishermen derive from observing gear on the water or using electronic equipment and their own gear marking techniques, as well as what additional information on-call gear marking approaches might be able to provide to them. We identified a healthy degree of competition between gear manufacturers as well as a general desire to explore interoperability. Each manufacturer we interviewed expressed confidence in their approach and valued the opportunity to work with fishermen to test and iteratively improve their equipment. Focusing on legal and regulatory issues, interview participants described the ways in which cooperative agreements within and among sectors might enable the industry to formally or informally address gear conflict. Fishery managers also highlighted the successful efforts of industry to create conventions or agreements. There was no consensus among managers about where the ultimate oversight of an on-call gear regulatory program should reside and by what vehicle that management approaches should be implemented, whether via a fishery management plan or otherwise. Gear conflict amendments in various FMPs of the New England Council were discussed in detail. Some offshore lobster fishery participants believed that on-call gear could present an opportunity to improve intersector conflict in high-use areas under future agreements, particularly in southern New England. Several fixed gear fishermen we interviewed wanted to be able to integrate on-call fishing gear into their operations as quickly as possible in the face of pending and current closures, and expressed concern that permitting programs or EFPs would in fact be slower than they would prefer with too few participants able to participate in newly closed areas. Liability for damage to gear was a major area of uncertainty identified in our interviews. At this time, it's unclear what the legal ramifications of damage from gear conflict are, where liability might be assigned under those circumstances, and whether the use of equipment to detect deployed on-call gear could or should be mandatory, and how such requirements might be enforced across jurisdictions, as well as within them. We anticipate that our report will cover these questions in significant detail. One serious shortfall in the phase 1 of this project has been a low number of contacts with law enforcement professionals. However, we did discuss various agencies' law enforcement missions with fishery management professionals we did contact, which ameliorates this gap to some degree. Overall, industry and management interviewees expressed that the serious consideration must be given to the compatibility of on-call gear with law enforcement missions across jurisdictions. Focusing on socioeconomic issues, stakeholders expressed serious concerns about the cost of acquiring on-call gear. Many expressed the opinion that on-call gear costs were so high that it would not be possible to acquire it without partial or complete subsidization of costs. Many fixed gear fishermen we interviewed generally expressed concern about their own ability to adapt their operations to the use of this gear because of their inexperience with digital technology, particularly the older fishermen we contacted. Some participants expressed optimism about the use of more modern technological approaches, or they expressed that they anticipated gaining a competitive advantage over their colleagues because of their ability to adapt to the use of on-call gear. Our fishermen, technology stakeholders, and managers all agreed that the education requirements of an on-call fishing gear system would be significant. Fixed gear fishermen who have been using on-call systems reported that significant time was required to become familiar with the gear and integrate it. The amount of time reportedly required for training and habituation to on-call gear ranged from 1 to several days worth of work in a classroom or on the water. It is likely that expanding the adoption of on-call gear to dozens or hundreds of operators will require the development and deployment of a significant training and education enterprise, with significant increases in the number of contacts with industry overall. We anticipate that our report will cover these issues and approaches in significant detail. Finally, many industry participants expressed deep anxiety, distress, and other mental health challenges associated with the prospects of on-call fishing gear. Several participants reported that their personal and professional lives have been negatively impacted by fishery closures and the way in which protected species impact mitigation programs have been developed and implemented with the fishing industry. A majority of fishermen expressed pessimism about their own futures and the future of their communities. These issues, as well as recommendations for approaches to program implementation that could be designed to address and ameliorate challenges associated with mental health and community well-being, will be contemplated further in our report. As of today, October 5th, Phase 2 of the project is ongoing. The major feature of this phase is an in-person workshop, which is being hosted October 13th and 14th in Danvers. There are 64 registrants as of today. The workshop will be facilitated by the Consensus Building Institute. And today's panel discussion is a question and answer opportunity that I hope you'll take advantage of, as we'll be able to report out on the workshop. Many fishing industry stakeholders identified trawl conventions, the direction in which trawls are placed on the ocean bottom in a given area, as a major issue of significant interest and a major development with respect to the enforcement of provisions that might minimize gear conflict. We anticipate using an ArcGIS tool called Survey123 to work on spatial tools with fishing industry participants in order to map these different trawl conventions. Phase 3 of the project, which we anticipate beginning in Q4 of this year and extending into Q1 of next year, will comprise the development of the white paper report. Specifically, we will be summarizing the scoping and interview phase as well as the workshop synthesis components, and we'll be developing policy recommendations for managers across jurisdictions applying to each of the 4 issue areas contemplated in the project overall. And finally, as the project has been ongoing, we've identified a significant gap in the understanding of managers and agencies with respect to the socioeconomic impacts of the development and deployment of on-call fishing gear. We're working with the funder to develop a socioeconomic modeling phase of the project we're calling Phase 4. The project we're envisioning would comprise an economic welfare model, and it would use a scenario-based framework with Monte Carlo simulation approaches to uncertainty in certain variables. The outputs of this model would allow us to be able to anticipate the potential costs across sectors and within sectors associated with varying degrees of implementation of on-call gear in time and space. This concludes our project update. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to participating in the panel discussion with you.